Family disputes can make us feel isolated and vulnerable. Maybe you're going through a divorce or a legal dispute about your kids. Perhaps you've spent hours on Google or have even posted anonymously on Facebook to see what others have to say. But are you getting the actual information and support that you're looking for? Our podcast, Legal Lounge, aims to dispel misinformation and downright bad legal information to empower anyone with questions about their family, their children, their finances, their marriage, and the law. As a team focused exclusively on family law matters, we aim to help listeners not only with the information they need, but also with the hope that their situation has a solution. Short disclaimer, please note this podcast is for educational purposes only, and the information should not be relied upon as legal advice or for legal purposes. We're back on the Legal Lounge, and I'm so excited to have a friend of mine on this podcast episode. My friend Brittany comes to us from the non-divorce world. Yay! Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Teresa. My name is Brittany Canaski. I'm a life and leadership coach and trainer at my own company, Hello Velocity. So I love helping both individuals and teams to accelerate their goals, both personally and professionally.
Well, I love having you here in the Legal Lounge because I think our listeners have probably heard enough about divorce and enough about what is involved from a legal education perspective. And at the end of the day, it comes back to life. It comes back to family. That's the only reason we have so many family law disputes or issues. And so I'm excited to have you here today to help our listeners learn more about what to do when they have major life transitions, and then also to have the real conversation of why get married at all, right?
Fair question.
Fair question. So let's talk about those tools, some of the tools you work with your clients to address major life transitions.
Yeah, and for me too, again, being more on the life and leadership side, I cover basically end to end, whether it's career stuff, whether it's personal stuff. I love getting into all of it. So whether it's a job change or promotion, or maybe the marriage side, big move across the country, like all of these things have come up with clients. So it's great having specific tools that kind of work the whole gamut with my clients. And the one that I always recommend to people when they're even just getting started or want to like maybe dip their toe in the water of some sort of coaching or self-reflection is learning more what your values are and then using those as a filter to help you make those big decisions. But it also works on the day-to-day decisions too. So I call them core values. People have probably heard of it before, but most people I talk to have never actually figured it out for themselves what that means. So I walk them through an exercise to help them identify it and then have really like 3 or 4 core distilled words or phrases that really help them make more tangible what's most important to them in life and how they're showing up. And again, then you use it as filters for these everyday decisions.
That's huge because I feel like I've, and more on the business side, I've talked with other business owners and even in the business field or perspective, it's like identifying those values is really important because those are a guiding light when you are making these decisions. What are some examples of different values that you've helped clients work through both in the business and personal realms?
Yeah, so I'd say even using my own values as examples, one of my core ones is connection. And that's kind of my people bucket, I call it, of all the different relationships and how I want to build deeper connections and relationships with people. So I always like to start with people when it comes to values is first you kind of list out all the priorities, whether it's people, things to do, even think about how you spend your money or like to spend your money on things. And those are kind of the activities and the things that will lead to your values. So then I kind of reverse engineer it later. Once I get the value words, then I list my priorities that are within that, if that makes sense, like the activities and people. So yeah, my connection is my people bucket, and I'm all about the deep connection with people. I love one-on-one time. I'm also an extroverted introvert. So I'm all about, let's, like we've gotten coffee before and just sit there for an hour, hour and a half, and we can just chat all day. And that's really valuable to me, that time and those types of connections. So that's one example. Another one for me is empowerment. That's also basically my life purpose, I think, is empowerment and empowering other people, empowering myself. And that's sort of my personal development, professional development kind of bucket of priorities. So, of course, owning my own business, coaching people, always learning new things and tools and courses and books, all the things.
Yeah.
Really, like that is huge to me in my life.
Yeah.
So it's a big bucket. And then my other value is exploration. And this is me always loving to try new things. I love to travel, but when I travel, I love to engulf myself in that culture, meet the locals, ask the bartender, hey, where's a good place to eat here?
Yeah.
Instead of going to TripAdvisor, like I want to engulf myself and explore. And then even locally in Charlotte, I love to try new restaurants or workout classes, things like that. So it's, again, the value that I find in it. The exploration is the newness, a little bit of spontaneity, but also an angle of learning too.
Yeah, that's huge. And I will say empowerment is one of my law firm's values. And we did work together as a team to develop a whole list. But one of the guiding lights is empowerment, not only of our clients, which is a huge piece when we're talking legal advocacy, but also of each other, right? Because if we can help further each other's personal goals and different ideas that they're thinking about, help them work through those ideas, then they become better professionals for our clients. And then we also want to empower our community because, and that's part of the reason we even have this Legal Lounge podcast, is we want this legal education and other information to get to the listeners that need it. Because, you shouldn't have to sit down and pay hundreds of dollars to an attorney to get some of these, what we would view as basics. We want to make sure our community is more aware of the information out there. And side plug here, it also helps our clients in our community know that, okay, here are some questions to ask. And also, now that I'm encroaching on, say, a child custody dispute or maybe a separation and divorce, I know what professionals I now need to contact because maybe they didn't even know there was a life coach out there or a certified divorce financial analyst or divorce coach and roles such as that, because it is a very different field than maybe what a lot of people are used to.
Yeah. I love that empowerment is giving people knowledge too, or supporting them along their journey, but not necessarily doing it for them either, right? Like you want them to feel confident. You want them to be able to approach the next steps going forward too. And I feel that in coaching all the time too with my clients. Yeah.
And I'll do another little story here. And this is more on the fun side, right? Because these are pretty deep values that you've just identified. But side note here, when I first started living with my now husband, I realized he had a lot of like blank walls in his house, which I don't think is unique to him. It may be a characteristic of a lot of people or a lot of men, not to throw them all under the bus, but how often do you see like paintings and murals and like flowers and everything in their houses? Not very often, at least in my experience. And I realized unknowingly that beauty is one of my personal values. I just like the concept of living in a beautiful atmosphere. And that beauty extends not only to, okay, maybe changing the wall color from white to something else.
Just a little something.
It's just a little something. But maybe it's also, getting a centerpiece for the dining room table, getting a candle, lighting a candle, right? Because it's very therapeutic sometimes, at least for me, to light a candle and just stare at the flame and the beauty of the flame. And I come from a dance background as well. So that beauty for me shifts to the art side. I actually just saw The Lion King on the Broadway show, which was so cool. The costumes were fantastic. But I think for me, it's because I appreciate the beauty. And I didn't even realize that was really a personal value of mine. Until I was going through this dilemma of why are all the walls so white? My now husband's place. Like
that's such a great example too of like seeing beauty in different ways. And it's always so unique to each person, right? Like beauty to you means something so different to the next 10 people you meet that may have beauty as a value word. So that's the other thing I like everyone to really like deep dive and sit with these two of what it really means to you and how it shows up for you. And don't choose a word just because it sounds good or someone else has something similar. You want a word that really evokes something emotionally for you. And it's huge. Also, it's a really funny example that you shared about that because my husband, his father is an artist. So he literally has paintings all over his house before I moved in. And that is probably the only male I've ever met with that example.
Go figure. But to your point where you really want to embody and figure out what you embody in terms of values, I like to remind people that integrity was one of the values of Enron. And so,
Ooh.
they didn't necessarily embody that.
Yes.
So it
Yes.
really is taking that for both your personal side and your professional side, really doing that deep dive to your point of what are your values.
Right. And walking the walk. Right?
And walking the walk.
One thing to choose them, it's another thing to follow them. So I always start with clients of just maybe writing on a Post-it and stick it on your computer, stick it on your bathroom mirror, refrigerator, multiple places, wherever. You'll see it every single day until it's really ingrained and automatic for you. And because, again, you can use it every single day, making little life choices or big decisions, right? Like those previous examples, job changes, things. But even if it's, sometimes for me too, being mostly introvert is I have to check in with myself a lot. Where's my social battery? Am I really up for a certain networking event or meeting up for some sort of event? And that's a way I can easily check in with myself is, okay, am I craving connection right now? Yes. Okay, go to it. If that doesn't feel right in the moment, or I'm like, oh, I actually really need to just sleep, honestly, is usually my alternative option. And that's okay too. And, it's less judgment on yourself, and it's very, very much empowering, honestly.
Yeah. Building relationships is a natural part of life. But how does the law affect those relationships? Do you want to marry your significant other, but have cold feet from the many divorce horror stories out there? Are you preparing for a custody battle against your ex? That is where Modern Legal comes in. We offer education and knowledge about the law when it affects the relationships near and dear to your heart. To learn more about how family law affects your family, book a consultation with an attorney of our Modern Legal team by visiting our website, emailing us, or calling us at 704-286-6302. Check out the information about Modern Legal Services at modernlegalnc.com. It's interesting from my perspective because obviously I see a lot of failed relationships in my job. And that has begged the question at times, well, what does make a relationship healthy or unhealthy? And I feel like this conversation about values is a really good conversation to have when we're trying to impart, different skills to have healthy relationships versus going down the divorce road.
Yeah, and I'd say too, that's a great conversation to have with your partner or a potential partner is what are your values? And not that they have to be the same as the other person. Even your example of beauty, you recognize in the moment, oh, maybe that's not one of my husband's values, but that's okay, right?
Yeah.
And you guys can come together and still he can value your values.
Yeah.
Not to get too meta about it, but he can respect your values, right? And encourage them.
Yeah.
And same when you're choosing a partner. It's not like they have to be the same 3 to 4 values, right?
Yeah.
But they should be cohesive. They shouldn't be fighting each other, right?
Yeah.
Like that will cause some friction over the long term. But knowing that about someone is huge, and knowing that, you can live in harmony with that and support each other and encourage each other.
That's huge. And I want to emphasize that a little more because I would much rather individuals identify that this relationship, although it may be fun in the moment, is not necessarily the most healthy and long-lasting relationship. Maybe after like the first 3 to 10 dates, not 3 to 10 years of marriage, and now you have 2 kids in the house together.
Right.
And it's so interesting from my perspective where I have seen individuals who are going through the separation process and they'll be like, well, I found out 2 years in, my partner didn't want children. And I'm like, ooh, maybe that was a conversation you should have had before you said I do. Yeah. If one of their values is to have a big family and have children and their view of a legacy is incorporating the, having children and passing on a legacy.
Right.
Because there's plenty of people in this world that's not one of their values. Maybe they don't want children. Maybe they don't even want to necessarily save money because they want to live in the moment and just travel the world. And opposites do attract, right?
Yep.
And sometimes that makes things spicy, but spice does not mean healthy.
Right. And long-term sustainability is what most people are going for, I think, when you get married, right?
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah. Like I really still do believe that most people, when they say I do on the wedding day, are never contemplating divorce.
Right.
Or separation.
Right. Yeah, you don't go into a marriage expecting divorce, right?
And,
or wedding day.
and a better way to shield against that, right, is to have those discussions about these core values and
Right.
and really those life goals and,
Mhm.
and life desires and passions.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see that as a huge difference for people like starting off a relationship too, is how honest you can be upfront about who you are,
Yeah.
what's important to you, what your values are, and being straight with the other person.
Yeah.
Honestly, like that was one of the key moments with my now husband. I remember so clearly our first date. I tell everyone this story of this was so eye opening to me is that he actually said on our first date, "Hey, if we get to a point where I don't like you or this isn't working, I'm going to tell you."
Love that.
It's like, oh my gosh, men say these things,
Yeah.
right?
He's so
We're not
mature.
we're not playing games. Like we're not,
Yeah.
assuming things or questioning everything.
Mhm.
We just set it straight. And I'm like,
Mm.
thank you for respecting me enough to say that, first of
Yeah.
all, to my face in the moment. And yeah, I feel like that just laid such a healthy foundation for us. It's like, say it straight and say
Yeah.
what you want,
Yeah.
express it. So even in my coaching, from careers to relationships or individuals, it's all about having clear expectations, but then
Yeah.
communicating those expectations with the other people involved.
Yes.
And that's like 80% of any sort of conflict or issues that people come up when it comes to any sort of relationship is
Yeah.
that you either have these expectations in your head, you haven't communicated them, or vice versa, right? So
Yeah.
I think as a whole society, we just need to be better at communication.
Yeah, I 100,000% agree.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. If communication was a skill, like instead of English class or math class, communication class in high
Right.
school.
Yeah, middle school even, like all the way
Yes,
through
yeah.
college, please. We
Yes.
need it.
Yeah, that would be great. Right alongside preparing your taxes, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
these practical adult life skills, I mean, those are great points. And from my perspective, in my relationship, I remember because I had a very traumatic childhood. I remember me striking out time and time again with guys I was dating or trying to, pursue a long lasting marital relationship. And luckily, I didn't get married to any of them, so I didn't have to go through the divorce process. Definitely no judgment to anyone who has figured this out after they've gotten married. But for me, I realized at one point, I need to just take a break from dating at all. And I need to do the self work to make it possible to be as mature as your now husband was on that first date, to say that. Because I feel some people have internal battles that they feel either nervous about being that upfront with someone else or being that honest, or maybe they are able to communicate, but they're only able to communicate about very surface level stuff and never the deep stuff. And I remember taking a good bit of time off. I actually am a big meditator, so I went on a meditation retreat, and I remember one retreat specifically where it was like, you got to cut those negative energies that are just tying you down, internal, external, all the way around, and open yourself up to what you really want. And then be honest about that
Right.
with yourself and then with the person you're trying to engage in a romantic relationship with.
Yeah, it sounds so simple, but it can be so difficult
Oh,
in the
it's so
moment,
hard.
right? It almost feels like bury yourself to
Oh, yeah.
someone else, right?
Yeah.
And there's the fear of what are they going to say, what might happen. But I always say, putting yourself out there, being honest will lead you to not have regrets later, right? So even if it is, not the outcome you wanted, isn't it better to find that out now than later, or to like delay the inevitable, right? The few moments of an uncomfortable conversation to save you maybe months and years of uncomfortable, like unsettled or holding back.
Yeah.
Like I no longer see that as a fair trade-off for anyone.
Yeah.
And I know I used to, before coaching and doing all this self-reflection work, I was the same, where I would avoid difficult conversations. I would say, oh, this is what they want me to say, or this is a polite thing to say, or nice girl Brittany would do this, so I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
But now it's no, this is what I want, this is what I need, and I need to ask for that, or else who else is going to ask for it for me?
Yeah. I'll go ahead and say it. I think it was the fourth date, had to be the third. I think it was the fourth though. Date with my now husband. I was like, I'm going to do a prenup, just so you know. And it was so funny because like I tell people that now and they're like, oh my goodness, that's like a pretty big request. You barely know the guy, all this, that, and the other. And I'm like, I'm a family law attorney. I have my own law firm. There's all these other considerations. At that point, he had already expressed, his, perspective on work and saving money and retirement. And I know that he was in a financial position, in a very independent state. And if we're two very independent people bringing a lot to a marital relationship, and we're very cautious people at that. It's
Mhm.
like, I need this. And this is just, I would say it's even more than a value. I think for me, it was just like, yeah, we're going to have to do this if we're going to make this a serious situation.
Yeah.
And for me, I tell that story, and especially from other women, they almost like pull back. They're like, whoa, you wanted a prenup and you just said it blatantly to your now husband? I was like, yeah, because if I couldn't say it blatantly to the most important person in my life now,
Mhm.
then it was never going to come out. And then that meant for me, I wasn't then ready for marriage.
Wow, that's a great point.
So, and that's more about me and less about him.
Mhm. I love that. That's a great
Mhm.
example. Yeah, another one you kinda touched on it earlier too, but, it is a personal example for me and my husband of, probably a month into us dating, he did share he didn't want children,
Mhm.
and up to that point, I thought I did, and I said, "Okay, I need to think about this," and
Yeah.
I didn't really pull back, but I went inwards for, like, 2 weeks. I'm like, "I need to think about this because this would be a deal breaker, right? If we're not
Mhm.
on the same page, we need to know that now." Again, one uncomfortable conversation now versus months, years of
Mhm.
something not working out or it being way worse. And yeah, I had to do the self-reflective work of, okay, do I want kids? Is it something important to me? Is it my value
Mhm.
or is it in alignment with my values? And yeah, it took me 2 weeks to really think through it. And it was so interesting that the I had never thought of not having kids was my
Mhm.
first realization. It's
Yeah.
just I grew up small town, everyone had kids, people most women were stay-at-home moms, right? It was just sort of what I grew up with and what I saw. And I always, my whole life, had this conflict, internal conflict of I didn't want to be a stay-at-home mom, but I didn't want to be a mom that worked with kids.
Yeah.
And I never could think past that of like, oh, there's not a third option, right? It's
Yeah.
just you have to have kids. So I didn't
Yeah.
know there's a third option. So when he had posed that to me, when I started thinking about it, and then I thought, oh, wait, there is an option to not have kids, all I could feel was relief.
Mm.
And I've never heard anyone talk about it that way before.
Mhm.
That's why I love to share it with people of it was such a personal, obviously, decision, but it was such a huge decision too. And not many
Yeah.
people talk about it. So I want to share with other people that, wow, if I could feel relief of this decision that I didn't know had been kind of haunting me all my whole life.
Yeah.
And this felt like an avenue of choice and really intentional choice to go after it. And yeah, so it was very eye-opening, very helpful for me, and then matter of fact, it didn't end up being a deal breaker with him, obviously, and now we're married and very excited, and, we check in, honestly, pretty consistently about it too,
Yeah.
knowing that we're open of, like, someday it may change, but we check in regularly, and we're like, we're
Mhm.
still so happy with that decision, and it really aligns with who we are and our values and the life we're looking to build, because
Yeah.
that's also something we talk about all the time is our future and
Yeah.
staying on the same page about that, so
Yeah. Oh, that's huge.
yeah.
Because I've seen it on my side, on the separation divorce side, where she never wanted kids or he never wanted kids, but we had kids. And my least desired case from a child custody standpoint is when neither party actually wanted the children. And
Mm.
even though they're not like bad parents in terms of physical abuse or anything like that, but they're like, oh, well, I want to spend my weekend at the beach. Here are the kids. And
Mm.
the other parent's like, well, I already made plans because I thought you were going to have the kids. That's my least favorite case because I'm like,
Right.
okay, you guys got to step up. You guys did
Mm.
choose to have these children,
Right.
even if neither of you wanted children.
Mhm.
And it's so important to have that very mature uh, reflection internally to decide that,
Yeah.
and then to communicate that with your
Communicate it.
partner.
Yes, right?
Right?
The key aspect of it.
Yeah.
Communicate it. And then for me too, that ended up being honestly a difficult choice again because
Mhm.
society and everyone I knew and immediate family, that was the norm, right? It was just expected. Hence
Mhm.
why it was just sort of an automatic thought that I was going to do it. So then there were further communications with family members and all of that of, hey, so we're not planning to have kids. And even honestly, even strangers, when I mentioned that,
Yeah.
everyone has an opinion about it, of course,
Yeah.
or most people will say, "Oh, you'll change your mind," blah, 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 all the things, which coming from someone who doesn't want kids, those are not helpful. I just wanna put that out there. It's not
Yeah.
helpful for random strangers to put their opinion on you,
Yeah.
in any case, especially something so personal.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's another shout out is just Don't put your own wants and needs and expectations on other people, especially strangers.
Especially strangers. And to your earlier point, because of the environment and the societal influences in your world, you didn't think about the choice outside not having children, right?
I literally didn't know it was a decision.
Yeah, right?
Didn't even consider it.
And isn't it just having the option that there is this third choice empowering in and of itself?
Yeah, definitely.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I admire you so much.
Thank you.
Yes. So that honestly brings me to our last point of discussion is, well, what's the point of marriage? Because we are both relatively recently married.
Yeah.
And we see a lot of life struggles in our respective fields professionally. So what was it for you that you were like, okay, marriage is going to be one of the, I guess, activities, if you will, that I engage in during my lifetime?
I don't know if there is a clear-cut answer for me still.
Yeah.
But I think for me, it really was that lifelong commitment and something about, again, I still can't even quite explain it, I guess.
Yeah.
But, the legal aspect of putting on paper that you're committing to someone.
Sure.
And I felt this, the week we got married, which was just, I don't know, 8 months ago, I think at this point, maybe 10. I should probably know off the top of my head. Sorry, husband.
Yeah.
Love you. But yeah, even just like within that weekend, that week, there was such a sense of security that I didn't expect to feel when we got married. But I think it's just that true commitment that I feel like you couldn't commit any deeper to someone.
Yeah.
And, we obviously, being in a relationship, we choose every day to be together and all of that. But this just felt like that deeper commitment legally. And we joked too, even right after we got married, we joke like, okay, so now if we wanted to break up, there's just more paperwork.
Yeah.
Because again, expectations of like, we know not everything is, what you expect on your wedding day. Like we want to be realistic, but obviously we are planning forever and we're committed to each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the differentiator for me, is just the legal commitment and the sense of safety and security that you have this partner and you can lean on each other for forever.
I presume you felt those feelings before you even said, I do, on the day of the wedding, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like leading up to the wedding, it kept building and building and building. And then when we had that moment too, legally, honestly, literally signing the paperwork is like, oh, I had such a feeling of peace.
Yeah.
And even so we did a like private ceremony the night before our actual wedding. Because Adam's dad did the officiating at our wedding, but it wasn't like technically legal, right? With North Carolina, blah, blah, blah. He's not a
darn
minister.
laws.
Yeah, exactly. So there's laws, all the things. So we're like, let's get someone official, legal, do it Friday night at a brewery. We love breweries. It was right before our welcome party, and we had like 8 people there and signed it. And it was, just such a beautiful moment. So then when people came to our welcome party, they're like, oh, are you nervous about the wedding? I'm like, no, honestly, I feel so at peace. I felt like I was on a high, right? Like I was just floating on cloud 9. That's such a saying, but I honestly felt it all weekend.
I love that.
And I don't know if it's because we literally signed the paperwork before everything, but it was just this, I felt so calm and like I knew it was the right decision. And super confident in us and our relationship. And just like, why would I ever be nervous on my wedding weekend? Like I was so blessed and happy. And I think everyone could see that too. They're like, why are you not nervous? I'm like, why would I be nervous? I'm happy.
It's so funny you say that. So I have a confession. My husband and I actually eloped before we had what I call the family wedding. And so I guess plug for that idea is to get legally married, before, or the small ceremony before the big one. And the one thing that I was not nervous about was the actual I do.
Right.
And I was nervous about, because long story short, I had this whole fiasco where my first wedding dress got altered and it ruined it. And I couldn't tell anyone because the elopement was a secret. And so then my husband is trying to console me, but he has no idea what happened to the dress. And anyway, long story short, I remember that moment where it was like, this is my person. There are no guarantees. Divorce is unfortunately on the table for everyone that it ever gets married. But I could be as certain as I could be with this person. Like this person brings me comfort. This person calms me down. I get all over the place sometimes. And he just brings me, he helps ground me, centers me,
Mhm.
and we think a lot alike, but we're very different. And so it was to your point where it was like, actually, I have more peace about saying the I do than not.
Right.
And I really hope that more people find that. Trust me, I dated for a number of years, and both before and after my self-reflection and my self-work. But I hate to further the saying, but when you know, you know.
Yeah.
and if you can find that, it's a beautiful thing. And I do remember after we eloped and, we admitted to each other, hey, we're going to have rough times. But I'm going to choose you. I'm going to choose you
Mhm.
even when you piss me off, even when you do something I don't want to be done, and all of the other stuff. But we have now said, we're going to work on this together.
Mhm.
We actually worked on our values together even before the wedding day. And we worked on a marriage statement after the wedding day. So we
Ooh.
have like this, kind of like what businesses do, like a mission statement,
Oh,
but for
cool.
marriage. And even through today, I'll joke, I'll be like, hashtag no refunds. So like, yeah, if we do get divorced, it's going to cost even more money because you're not getting the money back that you spent, or effort or emotion or
Yeah.
time, right? Hashtag no refunds. And he'll laugh and I'll be like, yeah, but seriously.
Right? Oh, I love that. So, can I turn the table on you and
Sure.
ask your reason for marriage and all that?
Sure. I will be brutally honest, because of my experience as a child, I honestly thought husbands beat wives. And what I mean by beat is like physically abused, because that's what I had been exposed to. So as a child, I was like, okay, there is no reason to get married.
Mhm.
Like, okay, I'm the female. I don't want to get beat. I don't want to get in trouble for things that are not my fault. I don't want to be blamed for all these problems. And so from my very young mind that I was still learning about the world, I had only been exposed to domestic violence.
Mhm.
So for me, it was like, yeah, I am not getting married. I am not having children, because this is a horrible world to, raise children in, at least from what I saw. And it honestly wasn't until I was in college where I was like, oh, wait, domestic violence doesn't exist in all romantic relationships?
Mhm.
And it was interesting because it wasn't that I hadn't been exposed as a child. Like my godparents, they have a beautiful marriage and relationship. My brother has a wonderful marriage with his wife. Granted, that happened later on. And it was more of the I didn't realize that actually most marriages don't exhibit domestic violence,
Mhm.
even though that's all I had seen through my entire childhood. And so I then, started learning more. I actually have an undergraduate degree in international relations, specifically conflict and security. And I joke, but I do mean this seriously, that warring countries is a lot like warring spouses in a divorce,
Mhm.
because they have very, very relatively basic needs that need to be addressed, whether it's for a country of people or just for that spouse and the children in the relationship. We're talking education, safety, healthcare, financial security, right? These are all things that, whether it's a country or a person,
Yeah.
you're striving for. And it was interesting because in my studies, if you will, when I was looking at relationships both at a macro and a micro level, I was like, oh, like skills like communication, skills like self-development, empowerment. These are all things that lead to healthier relationships.
Mhm.
And so from there, in my undergraduate studies, very, global international studies, I then learned more about the person, and I took a couple psychology courses as well. I took some sociology courses as well. And then shift my, education to legal studies, where, I mean, to be honest, law school is a bunch of, someone trying to throw mud on someone else, like whether it's a business or, people, right? That's what you study for
Mhm.
3 years, literally mudslinging. And you read all the laws
Mhm.
that the Court of Appeals has written about all these different types of relationships, whether it's marital, which primarily they're our studies are much more like business, real property, contracts. But at the heart of it all, it was people.
Yeah.
And I learned very quickly, okay, yes, there are unhealthy relationships. Then there is that subset of domestic violence and abusive relationships. But that's only a subset of unhealthy. Let's shift the coin. Let's turn that coin over. Oh, there's this whole paradigm of healthy relationships. This is beautiful.
What?
Oh my goodness. I didn't realize there was grass to be green, like on the other side. And then that was that self-exploration of working through what I knew as a child and what life could be. And for me, it was, okay, what is the life if I were in fantasy land, right? If I were living in the world of Frozen, right? Or if I were living in a Disney movie, like what would I want it to look like? And for me, it was almost as if a light bulb went off where I was like, I want a life partner. I want someone to depend on. I want someone who, if I start to have physical or mental disabilities when I'm 80 years old and I'm scared, someone to hold my hand and say, I'm scared with you. And that was like the turning point for me. It's like, this is the life I want to live. And then I dated a lot, which was very disheartening at times because the dating pool is horrible. I share that with anyone who's still in it. But once I found my person, I was like, okay, it can happen. It's crazy, but it can happen.
Oh, I love that it came from your own vision too, of just like starting from nothing. What would that future vision be for you? Yeah. Oh, and it does happen to be marriage, right? But it's your choice and your vision. And it's not just the expected, that's the norm. Yeah. It was, oh, why? And again, your value in it. You know, what do I get from it? Why is it important to me? And what do I want it to look like? That's huge. Instead of, again, the norm and just people do it. That's what you do at a certain age. And oh, you've been with someone for so long. Okay, you must be getting married. And that's the thing too. Like, I get those questions even sometimes when me and my husband, we've been together 8 years now and just got married last year. So then again, random strangers, whatever, when I was talking about us getting married, they're like, oh, how long have you been together? And I'd say it's 6 years. Like, you're just now getting married? I'm like, this is our choice and what works for us. And I am so happy about it. Like, yeah, that's it, right? It shouldn't matter. Yeah. Again, especially to strangers.
Yeah, especially to strangers.
Normal in our society. But yeah, you got to do what feels right for you and your vision and and your timeline too. That's huge. It's not anyone else's timeline, it's yours. And we all have our own growth we need to go through in order to be ready for that too, like you said.
Yeah, agreed. And I get nervous when I hear especially loved ones talk about, well, I'm going to give them an ultimatum or I'm going to, break up if we're not married by X date. And that just hits my gut off because a marriage is two people, not one. Let me point that out. And that's not, that's not legal education, right? That's just the reality of it. And if you don't have two people entering into this relationship voluntarily, not only voluntarily, but excited for it and have that internal peace about it, then I would beg people, take a look in the mirror. It's okay. This is your life. This is not your neighbor's life. This is not your parents' life. This is not that stranger that keeps telling Brittany what you should be thinking, right? This is your life. And you have a hand in what it looks like.
Yeah. You need to make those choices intentionally. I always use that word intentionally because we need to be proactive in our lives, right? We don't want to just be on autopilot. We don't want to just go with the norms because that's what everyone else is doing or people are pressuring you or telling you need to do things a certain way. Yeah. Just stop and go inward when you're feeling fuzzy, when you're not sure. Again, going back to making those big life decisions, they need to come from you and not other people. And we tend to forget that because we always have to ask everyone's opinions, or even when we don't ask for people's opinions, they still give them to us. So we need to
and then
know.
you read your Facebook feed and then you're like, oh, even more opinions
more
that
opinions
I should take
everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere.
Yeah. So quiet the noise a little bit, go inward, use your values. All of that is so, so helpful, and do what feels good to you too.
Well, we could be here all day talking about this topic, and I definitely don't want to take too much of your time. And for the listener, if you want to reach out to Brittany, where can they reach you?
Yeah, you can learn more on my website, hellovelocity.co. Follow along on LinkedIn is where I post most often. So just find me, Brittany Canaski. I'm sure the spelling's in the show notes because it's not easy to spell. Or you reach out directly at my email, brittany@hellovelocity.co.
Thank you, Brittany, for joining us in the Legal Lounge.
Thanks so much for having me. This was fun.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to our discussion. To learn more about me and the Modern Legal team, go to our website, modernlegalnc.com, or check out the links in our show notes to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can also call us at 704-286-6302. If you have been intrigued by the conversation and would like us to continue our discussions, please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. See you next time.